Hello, today we're going to do a little studying speed run. I'm going to be working on my proposal for my project. So the personal project I've been doing, I'm going to turn into a proposal that can be sent places, but I'm thinking I have to do an empirical project for my master's program. So I've been thinking of seeing if they would approve me doing it for that. And I'm going to try to see if I can finish it in the next few days so I can get that sent in and maybe send it to some people who might be interested in working with me. So that's what we're going to be doing today. But you see this TV right here? I'm basically going to put like my vacation on here. I'm going to pretend I'm on vacation because I'm honestly a little bit burnt out. And I've been watching White Lotus season 3. And granted, I don't want to be any of those people, but their vacation did look really nice. So we're just going to go on vacation and I'm going to put it like here. I've not taken a real break in quite a long time in my life because when I was at school, because I was struggling with mental health a lot in my undergraduate, like in my bachelor's, every time I would come home for the break, I would be working on my assignments that I got pushed forward into the break because of my mental health. So I was always working on that. Then I graduated and we went to visit my family in Brazil for about a month. But it was a bit complicated, but also I was still really, really badly struggling with mental health symptoms. We had just moved out of like my family home. So that was like it was still a pretty weighty trip. And then I got back and immediately I had to figure out how to move or how to get myself situated. Then I moved and I've been here and I just work all the time. I went on vacation to Portugal for a week, but I honestly just worked the whole time. Like I just worked the whole way through. I worked my normal remote job and then I also worked on this project that I literally I just feel like I haven't really gotten a real vacation or a real break for like a really, really long time. So I'm hoping once I finish my master's then I'll feel settled. And once I finish like this project, I'll feel settled. But hopefully by this winter, I think by this winter, I'll be like, okay, I'm in break mode now. Yes, look outside my window, guys. Very real. Real question is, why am I at the beach in a sweater? Let's fix that. Okay, there we go. Got the beach top on. We got the sunglasses on. And we are taking a shot of chamomile tea. Vacation pics. Look at this cute little shot glass I've got in Lisbon. It will be used once the master's program is done. All right. Now we're going to free ourselves from the clutches of this project that will not leave me in peace. Should we get like some beach music on? What would I listen to at the beach? Oh, I know. Okay, let's get on some Bad Bunny. Okay, what we're gonna do, I'm gonna let Bad Bunny down for like 2 seconds. I'm gonna start dumping everything in here that I feel like I need to explain to somebody about what I'm doing. So I'm gonna go through Mango. I'm gonna screenshot everything I need. Kind of hard when you're in the midst of this, this party going on, but we're gonna find everything that we need for this proposal.
Otros son bonitos que ven San Juan. Este o este. Échale saliva, se fue. Este. Wow. No le gusta que pare, si el polvo le empiezo. Hoje não tem conversa. Tô decidido, né? À toa que eu me joguei no Mandela. Parado no bailão. Ela tem popozão no chão. E o popozão no chão. Apaixona não, porque quer só tubarão. Porque tu tá apaixonada, nós empurrando no mundo.
So now what I'm basically gonna do is, I'm gonna walk through each of the little attempts that I made and how they grew, like what the issues were. I'm gonna get it all the way. I'm gonna talk through like, okay, so I had this one that was just sort of like ACH dynamics, but very imperfect. Then we're gonna have this first like more successful run through. I'm gonna talk through some of the things I could like sort of have some help with too, because one of the most inappropriate song plays in the background. Let's lower that. Basically, okay, so run through. So this is kind of my first successful run through, which I'm gonna rename. Um, which was just a 5 hour consolidation window and with 12 rats. And I'm gonna just make a little bullet list for myself right now that the successful things about it. I can honestly keep in like sort of bullet listy, but I'll probably change it. So the things that were successful about this run were basically oh my gosh. The most annoying thing in the world is trying to put images on a Sheets page or like a Word page or anything. It literally does not know how to behave. Like it does not know what to do with itself ever. So that's gonna be really annoying to like mess with. But okay, so in this one, basically what was successful was that I ran 12 rats with jitters. So like randomness within a range of sort of acceptable like ACH numbers. I'm going to talk about how it took me a long time to actually get what's the word? Sharp wave ripples.
Ei, Jorginho! É mais uma do Kevinho.
But eventually I extended the consolidation window and I got this number, which is sort of proportionally appropriate. It's proportionally appropriate, but but not necessarily like there's not a lot. So that's one element where I could use some help. But I'm gonna explore that later in this report as well. But you can see that none of my rots got anywhere close to like they didn't get any. None of my high stress rots got any sharp wave ripples. So that was promising. To make sure, then I basically ran this next one. And what happened with this one? Basically, what happened with this one is I added an extra hour, which was also expanded. And then the goal was to basically see what happened when the ACH went down. Basically, did they start making sharp wave ripples? And yes, they did. I would say at about the same rate as the high group, but obviously at a delay, so they had less overall. I keep being like, do I include one of my big failures? So I'm gonna basically do like something like this. So next sort of set of challenges that I face, I feel like I'm in a club right now. I'm gonna actually include, because I wasn't going to, but I'm gonna include one of my really failed attempts to make sort of memory traces. But I'm gonna talk about what my failures were there too, because I had many. This is kind of cool. I feel like my work is actually starting to culminate into something which is pretty interesting. So here I got a little bit more experimental with me trying to make memory traces, essentially. This is actually so cool. Wait, this is the coolest thing ever this is literally the coolest thing I've ever done. I've never done a project like this big or anything. And I'm actually starting to get really excited looking at it all together like this, because I just seem like such a real scientist right now. Why are we doing this? So basically what I started to try to do here is make memory traces or like I wanted to sort of see the memory traces or sort of simulate replay. Obviously mine are very, very abstracted. And then I went and then as I was trying to basically improve it, I realized that nothing was actually genuinely getting encoded, because ChatGPT was coding everything to sort of, it was almost encode the sharp wave ripples, which is not accurate. And I looked back at the other studies that and learned more about their computational model. And I realized that mine was lacking those Debian learning tools, which I had assumed that ChatGPT had intuitively added. I won't even put this. Mine was just lacking the Debian learning rules. And is that how you pronounce it? Debian? I think so. keep having to look up things for now. I want to go more abstracted route. I mean, no. Less abstracted route, which I'll cover in the next section. I should probably include the code for each thing, which I'm probably gonna put in a separate document. Or no, I'm gonna put it in a footnote, whatever, at the bottom. We're gonna call this one for now, but I'm gonna fix it. So there's gonna be A, B, C. This is gonna be. I'm obviously gonna make this look nicer, but this is E. And this is G. Okay, so A is this one, which is stage plus ACH dynamics. Is it gonna let me actually copy the code? If not, I'm gonna get really annoyed. Okay, I need better sunglasses than this. I have the worst luck. I got the cutest sunglasses when I was in Portugal. Like, I was obsessed with them, and they looked so cute on my face, and I was vibing with them so much. And then they got randomly lost. So now I'm stuck with these crazy ones I got after. They're not crazy, but they're just not a cute shape, but it's okay. When I'm on vacation in Bora Bora in real life, I will get some sunglasses. Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to copy paste this. I keep getting like these little moments of just extreme happiness because do you know it's like after a while you're really on a path now. And for some reason I had doubt at the beginning. I was like, how can I go from my, humanities degree to being a researcher? I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna do that. That seems like such a big jump. And now I've just been getting these moments where I realize that I really truly I'm gonna be a researcher when I'm like that's gonna be my career. And I just keep getting really, really happy. Like, oh, there's nothing sort of in the way now because especially I think taking this class on I've been teaching a class on R and tidyverse, I think is what it's called, which are these coding languages that you use in research. And I'm like, oh, I'm starting to actually develop research skills, which is cool. And that's just been making me happy. Like, oh, I did it. I feel like I've been throwing a ball, where you I keep thinking about potential and kinetic energy for some reason when I've been doing this. And I've been thinking I feel like I almost I put something into motion and now it has to complete its track, like it has to stay in motion. I don't know how exactly to put the abstract thought that I'm having into words, but it's almost like I'm on a train. It's like I can't get off the train, but in a good way. There's no stopping me now, It's playing all the Brazilian funk. Let's switch up a little bit. I didn't have it on shuffle. Just for variety. Okay, whatever. I'll figure out how to do that part later because it's really annoying. And the really, really annoying thing about Nango is that it doesn't let you really copy paste what's in here, or at least I haven't figured out how to do it. And that means I have to sort of screenshot everything to save it like this. I just don't know how to do that. And I've been trying to download maybe. We're going to play around with that later. I'm really scared to sort of mess up my work somehow, but all the code will go into the bottom so that somebody smarter than me, somebody better at coding than me can look at it and be like, oh, this is messed up. This is really bad. Just kidding. So they can look at it and see what the issue is and what I was attempting to do. I also now want to get screenshots from the rat models that I was using that are going to get thrown in here too. So these are my run-throughs. Oh, wait, let me explain here. This right here is going to be kind of what everything is based on, which isn't a very specific way to put it, but I'm going to fix that later. So let's go hunt down those rat papers that I swear I feel like I keep labeling them and yet somehow they keep I guess I'm not labeling. I keep thinking I labeled it. Okay, I guess I did label it. Why is this gonna happen? I really hope someone's gonna pick this for something. As in to do a project with me or to supervise me.
De metile no hay pila de bobo cuando yo le freno vestido de Celine. Ay, la tata y la tata y la tata tienen que correcto cuando de mí se trata. Bitches is yelling they throw it. How about the whip it, the light and they throw it. Cocky is fucking.
There has to be some better way with these Word document pictures because why? Everything is so annoying. We're gonna take a break. Let me show you. We got everything here. This is what mine was based off, was these two, which I put at the top and then I put it here again. Again, I'm going to talk about my challenges. Like, as you can see here, ChatGPT did not understand or back to baseline that, which is really annoying. This was actually in a video that I didn't post, was me trying to fix this to actually make it accurate to the these little graphs, and it was literally like the simplest thing. Sometimes I don't understand how ChatGPT, like, really complicated things sometimes it can do fine, but it's these little simple things that it really doesn't get, where I was just like, just make this go back down here, and it was not comprehending at all, and that was really annoying. So that took me forever. And it still obviously didn't get fixed, but it's fine because it's not even necessary right now anyways. It's just to show what I'm doing, and either way they would have been in this range. So yeah, this is what we have so far. And then here at the top, what everything was based off of, which I'm going to change the name of that, but it's just going to talk about these. I'm going to do like some writing about these different groups and everything. Basically, like, let's see, like, what I was. You know what sucks about studying? I feel like the reason I like sometimes I don't study as much because I get so stressed out when I'm studying. Like, I'm so like locked in that it's like too much. Does anybody else get that? Where I'm like, I'm so locked in, but it's like to a painful degree. Where after like an hour, I'm really burnt out. What I'm going to talk about here is obviously explaining. So I was trying to get these two graphs onto a Manila. I'm starting to get a really good feeling right now. I'm getting a really good feeling, guys. It's not that far. You know what I mean? Like, it's really not that far from done. That's the thing, is that, I'd spoken in another video about how I have this little like idea, I don't know how to put it, this little like theory that you should make things as easy to slip into your life as possible, like path of least resistance. And I feel like it's not that hard for me to go from here to somebody supervising me for a little bit, because there's not that much left to supervise. Like, I'm already have some semblance of results. It's just making sure that everything is properly done and that the things that I want to add are properly added. It's really not that much of a jump in here. Obviously, in the beginning was a massive jump. Do I have anything? Do I have a theory? Will that theory play out right? Will I have enough information? And it's like, it's not a big jump right now to get somebody to supervise this project, because I'm going to give it to myself. It's looking pretty darn good. Like, I feel like it's looking good, actually. And I have so much good research and et cetera, et cetera. It's just getting it in front of somebody who can give me a little bit of a boost. Oh my gosh. I'm thinking back right now. I'm just like, my mind is drifting back to all these old memories. I think that this is literally the music I was always listening to at college too, at like all my college parties. And like when I was in New York, like I'd go to like a bar or something, and this is like kind of what we were listening to. So I'm like drifting back through memories of New York and like my whole entire like story arc there, and like the trauma and then like all these different things. I'm thinking about the last time I was there before I moved to London, and just being like, girl, I got your back. That's been my story arc recently. Just been like, I have my own back no matter what, like I will pull through for myself. Whatever I want and whatever I need, I will pull through for myself. I'm like my number one supporter, no lie. Like, nobody's messing with me because I'm my own baby, like that's my baby you're messing with. So absolutely not. We're not gonna let that happen. So yes. I'm just looking back, like I'm looking back at my old self and just being like, girl, I got you. Don't even think about it. Don't even stress. Like, I got you. You'll see. I'm just so ready for it to be done. I'm so curious how this is gonna go. I'm so like, I think the amount of pent up energy I have from being in this spot, it's like it's a lot. Like, I'm really ready for it to be done. It's like a ball rolling down a hill where it's like, oh my god, like I just need it to be done now. Also, it's really not a big jump now to get into a PhD program, if that makes sense. Like, I'm done my master's degree. I'm not going to go straight into a PhD program when I'm done with this. I'm going to do my full year. I'm going to maybe get a research assistant job after this and get some more experience. I don't feel like going through the stress of immediately, especially because I don't want to do more psychology programs. No. I want to do something neuroscience. I love psychology, but I don't want to get my PhD in psychology. So I want experience. So I'm going to get it, because I'll get everything I want for myself. Okay, so again, very imperfectly written, but I have everything written here. And now I am going to take a break and maybe go for a walk or something. And it's a little bit of a hectic week right now because I have to basically catch up on my schoolwork too because I missed the first week. And it's a lot of work to catch up on actually right now, like a lot of videos and stuff to watch. So, and then yeah, so I'm just going to take a break and go lay by the beach, here in Bora Bora where I am. Okay, see you guys in a bit. Hello, this video is about to be the most insane mixed bag of things. First of all, I'm working on getting lamps because the lighting in here, it's like really strong overhead lighting and it creates these like figures. It's like a ghost. It's just overall not my most flattering lighting in here, but basically I have continued to work on my proposal and I'll show you what I've done. I have just been writing it as I've been going along and it's in a very rough draft state right now, but pretty proud of it still. And the other thing we're going to be doing today is completely unrelated to my project, but I have to make a mental health zine for my current job. And I've been feeling a little unmotivated because I've been a little bit tired and just burnt out. But I really want to finish this. I really want to make it cool and I need to do it like today. So we're going to be working on that. And I was just thinking on the way home about stuff that I wanted to sort of talk about. These are like my random podcasts. Like I'll just be talking about anything. And I watched White Lotus season 3 recently, and it was so good, but it really had me thinking about my relationship to Buddhism. And I wanted to talk today about my relationship to Buddhism and some of the things that I've sort of worked through on my journey. I have a very confusing relationship to just religion and spirituality in general because I grew up with a lot of it around. Didn't really believe in any of it. Then I went through a traumatic experience in college, started to believe in it. I was raised, so I would go to Baptist church like we'd go like every Wednesday because my grandma was Baptist. My grandma in Brazil was Catholic. So we had Catholic imagery in the house, but my grandma in the US was Baptist, and she's like a second mom to us. Like my grandparents were like second parents to us. We were constantly at their house and etc. They would take us to church on Wednesdays. And we'd go on Sundays. I sang in choir. Like I was literally that committed. Like we were literally like in choir, all this stuff. And every single summer we would go off to like we were going to church camp. We went to like a week long church camp. Through all of that, I would never really fully, even though I liked Christianity to like, obviously there were some challenges, like because at that point, for example, there's a lot of sort of confusion. Well, I was navigating discovering that I was bisexual when I was growing up, and then I was in the church and I was like, nobody was homophobic to me, but I was kind of like, do I really vibe with this? And I just didn't really believe in God that much. Like I remember one time I was in church and my parents actually got mad at me because I think I was going through like a rebellious phase, or I was really like wanting to be atheist and all this stuff, and I was really into Star Trek at that point, and I was like science for the win. And I was reading this, I brought my Star Trek book with me to church, and I was just refusing to listen in church. I was just reading my Star Trek book. And then my parents got mad. They took it away because they're like, if anything, I should just be respectful in church, which is a good value that I was raised with for sure. And the interesting thing is that neither of my parents were really very Baptist. They weren't really that Christian at all. They would go to church obviously my dad was raised Christian. My mom was raised Christian, and they would go to church from time to time to like hear us sing if we had something in choir or whatever. But my parents weren't really that, like we were Buddhists, like, we weren't going to like do sort of Buddhist practices all the time. My mom was the first Buddhist in the family. She introduced my dad to Buddhism when they lived in Brazil. And then from that point on, my dad, like, he also didn't really vibe with Buddhism for a long time, and I think later got into Buddhism more. I don't know the exact story, but he later rediscovered Buddhism, and he became like much more devout. Like he has like a Buddhist center he goes up to regularly. I went up with him one time. Every New Year for sure, we would go with like my mom, dad, sister, and I would go to this Buddhist temple in my city that was like only Vietnamese people really. And then we would go from time to time, like once a year really, to go if we didn't go to a service, we would just go basically to leave like light some incense, leave an offering to like there was a statue there. I don't know who it was, but we were raised with like a lot of Buddhist imagery too and stuff. Like growing up, we had like mantras that we like remembered and all this stuff. So it was like a big part of my life growing up. And I think I liked the idea growing up because I saw so much of a relationship between, you know, like homophobia and all these different things, or these sort of traditional cultures that I didn't really vibe with in Christianity. I just didn't really vibe overall with Christianity that much, even though I felt called by certain ideas. And I went to two different churches. Like we had my church, and then we had a church that was like almost like an adjacent church that my dad even went to growing up. And I had really, really good friends there because we'd go to church camp every summer, and we would go there from time to time too. And they're just amazing. Honestly, I finally decided to get baptized actually. And when I go home in like a month and a half, I need, no, like a month, I need to figure everything out, but I'm planning on getting baptized and everything. So that's, I don't know, it's all part of the journey. But anyways, but I would go to their church, and they had such a good church. Like everybody was so kind. Everybody was so, like, they were just, I feel like they gave me faith because they actually were living up to values that I think I really liked, and they were kind, and the church was really diverse and all these different things. And I was like, oh, this is really beautiful. And they would actually, I feel like they really went out of their way to do sort of like mission type thing. Not missions, like they weren't like, that's the cool thing I liked about them. They weren't, you know, I'm going to go off to Africa and like, you know, build a school and it's going to be like this experience for these white children. Like they were doing real work. They had a lot of refugee families that they sort of took in and like helped get set up and all these different things. And I was literally like, that was like my close friends were there through that program and all these different things. So I just really saw them doing good work. And I think that growing up, they were like a good image of me of what Christianity should be to me. So anyway, so then I went through a traumatic experience later on. And at that point in time, I'd never had faith or anything to that degree. And then I went to school, and I started to go, I think after that, I really intuitively started to navigate spirituality more. Like I started to get sort of spiritual content. And I just really felt pulled, like, oh, I felt like drawn in, like I really wanted to learn more all of a sudden. And I think I was going through a really hard time at that point, and I just couldn't, I don't know, I didn't talk to anybody about it, but I just started to get more spiritual, and I just started to navigate that more. And I think I just got a bit older. I think I learned more, and I started to really resonate with Buddhism. I started to resonate with I didn't resonate with Christianity until further down the line, but I did start to feel like spiritual, like there was a universe and that universe cared about me, or not necessarily cared about me, but I was feeling like almost like there was a path for me. There was purpose to my life. All these different things that I feel like I just started to understand spirituality more, even though I started more like new agey sort of, because I don't think that I had much of a leaning. But then obviously like I started meditating and things because I just intuitively started meditating because that's what I grew up with. You know, I was like, oh, that's a good thing to do. You know, I started to be like, I want to start meditating more, because I always did want to engage more with Buddhism growing up, and it didn't happen. But I just was like, oh, like I wish that I was engaging with this more, because I like the idea, but I was in tension with it a lot. So I'm going to talk about it more in a second. I just want to get my little zine pulled up. Okay. Do not judge. It is not at all there yet. It is not, don't look at it and judge it, because it's literally such a work in progress right now. But yeah, I'm just making this zine for a conference, and it's going to be for gamers and things. And we just wanted to have like a fun little thing to give them about mental health. And I was like, let me make a zine, but it is in no way, shape or form even close to ready. Okay. It's pretty bad right now. And also the thing is that I wanted to make it like superhero themes, and I wanted to have, for example, different characters, like pop culture characters, and like, oh, what like people in pop culture with mental health and all this stuff. But unfortunately, every stupid thing is copyrighted, so I can't do that. So now I have to come up with like new concepts, I guess. So that's going to be my challenge today. I can't use like these pictures of Thor, so yeah, I can't use the word Thanos. Okay, whatever. Well, anyways, what we're going to do first is we're just going to find some stock images of like just random stock images, and I'm going to compile them here, which is usually what I would do if I was making a zine anyways. Like I just find cool pictures. So let's just do that. I just don't want it to look lame, you know? I don't want it to look like, I want it to look like, I don't want just really ugly sort of stock image superheroes, but that's what we're gonna have to do, I suppose. Yeah, I think what's funny is that when you're a kid, the thing is kids ask the best questions about religion, like sort of these really challenging questions. I wouldn't even say kid, like I was like kid to teenager, I feel like I had all these different questions about things that didn't really sit right with me. I remember when my little sister was little, she was one of the, we were both, well, she was really one of those kids that was always asking a question. And she was in Bible school, and the Bible school like leader, whatever, told us later that apparently she was asking like a million questions. She was like, who is God's mom? That's such a good question when you think about it. Like, who made God? All these different things that's like, well, I feel like the thing about religion and stuff is that obviously you get kids into it young, but a lot of the stuff is like, it's really, really conceptual, you know? It's really conceptual kind of stuff that it takes like a long time to really wrap your head around. And I think I just wasn't really able to wrap my head around some of the more abstract stuff that much when I was younger. Like obviously there was different things that were really big values for me when I was a kid that my parents raised me with. So for example, compassion, right? Compassion is a big idea in Buddhism. And my parents were super on it with it. Like they were always talking about being compassionate and all this stuff. And obviously, I think when you're a kid, that's not really that hard of a thing to wrap your head around. And so that was always a value that I was raised with, like a big thing for me. Granted, I think when you're young, sometimes it's like, there's always a bad and a good side to it, which I want to talk about the White Lotus season. So I'm going to talk about that later. But I guess that sometimes I think I had like almost too much compassion, which was like a big issue for me. I had to actually, when I went through on a spiritual path, I almost had to undo that part of me. Like it ended up being kind of like a negative, but yeah. So I think that I had a lot of questions growing up. So for example, my dad would talk to us about Buddhism like a lot. Like he was really, really into it. He was reading books and stuff, and he would just sort of get on these little sort of rants to us about different things that he was sort of learning or whatever. And I think that like sometimes like we honestly get a bit frustrated, I think, growing up, but I think looking back, it's something that I really appreciate about it's funny, a lot of the things that you don't like when you're a kid are things that you grow up to really appreciate about your childhood. But one time I asked him, this was one of my main issues that I had with Buddhism growing up, right? I told him once, okay, Buddhist monks go off to meditate, right? But then I was like, but how about, I asked my dad, I was like, well, they're just sitting there. They're just sitting around. They're not doing anything. They're just off in their head. And I was like, well, for example, I was like, what about rich people? Rich people, like they get really, really rich, and then they spend their money on the world. So when you think about it, they're doing more for the world by doing charity work and stuff like that. And I don't remember how the conversation went. I have a totally different relationship in my head to that idea now, because I don't think, like, I was like, no, this is the thing. I was like, even if a rich person is a bad person, if they're spending money on the world, aren't they still doing like good, right? More good than somebody who is like, just off meditating on a cliff, right? This is the thing that I think I didn't fully, like, obviously I grasped this when I was older, that just because people are spending money does not mean that money, like, it doesn't mean that they're not also having a massively difficult impact on the world through their wealth. Or, for example, like, I see rich people that, yeah, they're spending money, but the way that they're spending money is just, like, it's just, I obviously, like, I just didn't know enough about rich people. Like, I was like, oh, rich people, like, they're not just, oh, they're making lots of money and they're being a philanthropist. They're also getting these crazy tax breaks. They're making that money because they're causing immense harm in different parts of the world. Like, they're off, like, I'm not going to mention names, but I think of some that are these massive philanthropists, but then like, oh yeah, but on the side, they're also, overmining Africa, contributing to sort of pretty much modern day slavery in these countries and like all these different things. It's like, I think I just didn't fully know enough about rich people to see why it is that a philanthropist isn't doing at all what a monk is doing. That being said, obviously, I think that my anxiety back then, it's like, the point is that you learn to be, the point of doing the meditation is that you learn to be somebody who walks through the world causing less harm, and in causing less harm you encourage other people to walk that way too, and to cause less harm, right? But I just think that back then I think what was really difficult for me about it was I didn't like the idea. Like, I was like, well, yeah, you're learning or you're reaching this enlightenment or you're getting better, but it's like, but what are you doing with it then? Because yeah, I was in my head back then, I was like, well, but the thing is that there's actual like problems going on in the world that aren't necessarily solved by one person reaching any kind of enlightenment or something. And that's been a big part for me in my spiritual journey of being like, for me, going down that path gave me strength to go into the world and do more politically, because I was like, well, that's part of the journey, is that you are of service to other people. You know, that's been part of my spiritual journey, is I got more political and I wanted to engage politics more, because also, for example, certain things are just, to me, an illusion, right? It's like, well, white supremacy is a massive illusion of our egos, right? So I was like, well, then I want to go off and do something with that, rather than I'm going to go off and live in a monastery my whole life. But that doesn't mean that it's bad to live in a monastery your whole life, because you're spreading that to other people. But I think that growing up, that was one of the things I did not like about Buddhism, and that made me feel like in tension with it, because I was like, well, I don't want to just, I thought that to be Buddhist, you're just going to sit in a monastery all day, like sort of doing nothing, you know? So that's why I didn't like it. And then I changed because I learned more about what rich people actually do. What is the actual effect of being a rich philanthropist? It's like, etc. You know, it's about how you navigate the world. It's not just about how much money you give. So that was one thing. Another thing that the reason I didn't really like, I wasn't like, I think I just didn't really comprehend what God was. I didn't really imagine like a God in the sky, you know? I was like, I can't imagine a human being. I don't think like a person did all this. But that's the thing, is I realized later, I was like, well, I can only imagine a higher consciousness as a person, like a human being, because that's all my brain knows, but it's probably different. I started to have other ways that I conceived of a higher consciousness, something like, for example, I don't know, vibrations, wavelengths, our collective energy, like culminating. I think I just got more, my abstract thinking improved, and because of that, I was able to conceptualize what that meant. And I feel like I had situations where I saw it at work in my life heavily, like over time. If I was like, my life is so strange that I can't conceive of this as anything but like a higher purpose or a higher consciousness. And it's okay if people don't believe that, because I didn't believe it in it. And then later on, I started to feel it at work in my life. And again, I don't expect anybody else to believe it like me. I think if God wants, this is the thing that I don't like about, for example, there's things that I didn't like about Christianity. I don't like the obsessive need to make everybody a Christian, because to me, I think that sometimes I think Christians underestimate, if God is so powerful, I believe in God's power. So why would I think that God is not capable of doing that for others? You know, I was like, to me, I was like, well, if everybody is meant to be a Christian somehow, and I don't think that everybody's meant to be a Christian. I have such deep respect for every religion. And I think that every religion is us connecting to the same truth from different directions and from different cultural angles, you know? So to me, I think that I think that if God wants everybody to be a Christian, God will make everybody a Christian. And it's not my job to do God's work for God. You know, I don't see God that way, where it's like, we have to be doing all of God's work for God, where it's like, if I believe in God's power so much that I'm going to trust my path, I trust I'm following my path, other people will be led to where they need to go. That's like my thinking, you know? So for me, I don't feel that need to be like, I'm going to go off to another country and force all these like indigenous people to be Christian. It's like, if you don't believe how powerful God is, because if you believe that God is really that powerful, then you don't need to do the work. God will do the work. Like, also, why would God put us on earth for us to not? I just don't believe in that idea that we have to go out and like, obviously, I think on a human-to-human behavior basis, I think we need to learn together. I think that's part of our journey, is like learning together, but I don't think that I need to go off and change people's natural inclinations to that degree unless they're deeply harmful, you know? I just don't see it that way. I don't know. I think I just started to conceive of God differently. And I think I just started to be like, I can have my own relationship to God. And then for me, those two religions came together, and I just started to see my path with God is my path of releasing my own ego. And I think that because God to me, that higher consciousness feeling, they were saying this in White Lotus, and I was taught this growing up, that basically the feeling of enlightenment, it's almost like a drop of water going back into this ocean, right? This big pool of our collective consciousness, where you don't feel like you're just feeling like at one with everybody because we're all one, right? To me, that God is the ocean. That's how I see God. God is like the ocean. That's how I see it. I feel like that's why they go together for me. I don't see one or the, I think they just connect for me. And because I don't see God as a deity, or I don't see God as a person, but I see God as like a feeling or this sort of concept. I don't think I see God as like this wrathful being who's like, I hate you, I'm judging you because of this. Like, why would God judge? I feel like God is just all of us, like love, like just like this. I don't know how to put it, but that's how I started to feel God that way. That's why I was like, it doesn't mean that I think that the point of religion too is to give us a framework and to give us a family to navigate our spirituality with. And I think that everybody's spiritual family is going to look different. And I did grow up with people who were Christian, who were very kind, who walked with values that I think made sense for all of the different religions that I navigated before. And that's why for me, I was like, okay, I'm ready. I can commit now to being a Christian because I'm strong enough to know that I have my own relationship to God. And I can find families that are doing works that make sense for me. It's like a good family, good spiritual family for me. And then I can have, I guess, different spiritual families. I think that's just how I see it. Like, also for me, I think I grew up with different cultural backgrounds too. My mom's family is Brazilian, my dad's family is American. So it's not really that I guess strange for me, or it's just like my typical life to just have these sorts of different sort of splits in that are really vastly different, but then they make sense somehow for me. I think that just made sense for me. So it made sense for me to be Christian and Buddhist. It just worked. I think when I first started getting into spirituality again, I think the place that I started, because I think that made sense I was like 19, 18, 19. It makes sense for like an 18, 19-year-old who's just starting to understand her spirituality and all this stuff. I was very into New Age spirituality, not very into it, but those are the tools that I had. I don't think I felt ready to commit to Christianity because that's not how my spiritual journey came for me. And then I didn't feel like, I wasn't like 100% Buddhist. I think I had a lot of different things to navigate first. And the reason that I think that I went into New Age spirituality first is that I think a lot of New Age spirituality is really focused on things that, for me, having been through a traumatic experience, really useful ideas. So a lot of people are really into like navigating like self-love or self-development or your higher self, or things like that, elevating your life, that I think are very common in New Age spirituality. And I think I needed that at that point. That was like the language I needed. It was talking about like inner child, inner child healing, talking about your mother wound, your father wound, those kinds of things. That I think New Age spirituality is actually very psychology sort of centered in a lot of ways. And I think that was the language that I needed back then, and it helped me. But then as I started to navigate, I started to mature in my spiritual journey. I think there were certain things that didn't sit right with me about some elements of New Age spirituality. I didn't like feeling like I was constantly stealing concepts from other religions. I didn't like that there's not like a New Age spirituality church that I would really be happy with. It was sort of like this really lonely journey. And I think that part of maturing in your spirituality or being a part in your spirituality is also just engaging in that community and having a little bit more structure and tradition and stuff. I think is actually a nice part of religion. And I think that there's a lot. I learned a lot about spirituality in general. And I think that like switching, even though people like to think that atheism is like super like clean or sort of guilt-free, it's actually really like, I don't think that it is. There's a lot of also problematic or difficult things that have come from atheism too. So for example, I remember reading about how when people started to move into the age of enlightenment, where there was also that age of like colonialism, all these different things, what they did is that they basically created this dichotomy where white like white people were of the future and were connected with progress, and that included things like logic, the mind, and everything that was sensual, physical, spiritual ended up relegated to all the other colonized, like the culture that people were trying to colonize, right? Black people, indigenous people. So in that way, what they could do is they could say, well, that's just like irrational, that's not nonsensical, and it's also connected to all these cultures that we're trying to see as part of the past. And sort of almost like this sort of more atheist, sort of logical, rational mindset is of the future, right? That doesn't mean I think that's not why all people are atheists. I understand why people are atheists, and I don't care. I fully, if people feel like they're atheists, my sister's an atheist. I understand why, and I think people have beautiful reasons for being an atheist too. But that being said, I think that one of the difficult things about moving into a culture that's like extremely atheist is that there's a sort of loss of, I think that also atheism and capitalism were sort of growing at this, like grew more at the same time. And that I think part of that move into, oh, we're going to be very technological, we're going to be very this, like you sort of get detached from the spiritual. And I think that also spirituality also was connected with people's, like, for example, people's lineages. Like, we'd go to my dad's Buddhist church and there's like, Buddhist group, and it's like there's lineages of people and stuff like that. There's like this deep historical tradition and also this sense of community and everybody doing something for a connected purpose rather than just being individualistic. And yeah, I think that that's one of the cool things about religion and spirituality that I found myself appreciating as I got older. And I think as I navigated that switch from atheist to new age spirituality to just straight up being religious, I think that I was seeking a group where I would feel a sense of community, right? I wanted, I wanted that sense of community and of doing good together. I think that's super important, and I think that's something that our current culture tries to sort of rob us of very often. And I think that the move to atheism, I think that there can be more different types of groups for people to engage with, but I've always been a little bit skeptical of like this push to atheism. And granted, for example, I've been trying to read more about different economic systems. I don't like the economic systems where they where they're like, we're going to encourage everybody to be atheist, or we're going to force everybody to be atheist. I think that that's a little bit misguided. And I think that there's purpose also to religion. And yeah, I think that I don't think that we should discredit that. And I don't think that atheism is like this perfectly clean, sort of morally better situation, because it's not, because it's contributed a lot to the, the sort of push to colonize other cultures, to exploit other cultures, a push towards capitalism, a push towards sort of being in these sort of individualistic societies that also came from the push towards spirituality is primitive. People who are religious are just sort of these stupid people that don't know enough about science, where it's like, I know a lot about science, but I'm still very spiritual. And those are both parts of who I am. But okay, so the point was actually to talk about my relationship to Buddhism. I wanted to talk about some of the things that I've thought about over the years, and like some of the bumps in the road that I've had. And then I was going to see if I wanted to talk about White Lotus season 3. I'm sorry, but I'm really struggling to find good pictures for this mental health scene. These are not cute. These are not cute at all. Well, one of the first things that one of my first big bumps in the road, delving back into Buddhism, and I haven't been perfect. I still don't know, I've been a little bit lost in all of my spiritual journeys because I think I'm shifting, but I don't really know what lineage to follow or anything. So I've been a little bit confused, but I've been reading more books about Buddhism. I've been reading all of Thich Nhat Hanh's books and just doing my own thinking, I think, reflecting on the concepts that I learned as a kid. But one of my first big bumps in the road was actually with compassion. I grew up, I was too sweet as a kid. I think both my sister and I, we learned to be compassionate when we were little, but we both ended up a little bit too sweet, sweet to the point where we sort of, at least for me, I think I just let anybody sort of walk all over me when I was younger. And I feel like to this day, sometimes I struggle to know how to be, sometimes you need to have that little bit of edge, or you need to be a little bit mean. And later on, I did learn that I read in a book, Buddhist book, that being compassionate doesn't necessarily mean that you give up any kind of compassion towards yourself. Though sometimes I think the stories, I think in the more extreme examples that can be sort of encouraged, but I think those examples are really just to be sort of rhetorical. So for example, they'll have these sort of stories of people like, I remember one of like this guy who basically let these bugs were like hungry, so he just let the bugs eat him, and like you get these really intense examples. Now I don't think that that's I think particularly as young girls, I think that was a bit difficult of a thing to learn, because you want to have that little bit of like don't mess with me. And I did learn later that you still should have compassion towards yourself. You're somebody to have compassion towards as well. And that being Buddhist doesn't mean that you're just going to give up everything and just let people be as rude to you as they want. That's not the point. But yeah, we did learn about compassion growing up. We learned a lot about like bodhisattvas, who are it's basically the idea that you should see the most difficult people in your life as somebody that you're going to learn from, as people who have come back to basically help other people reach enlightenment. Again, sometimes these ideas, I think it is a path. You're not going to get it all at once. And sometimes they, I think abstractly, I sort of process them as I get older. But yeah, I was raised to be compassionate, honestly, too compassionate. I think I could have learned to be a little bit meaner and to stand my grounds like significantly more. But one of the first issues that I had was that I was navigating my spirituality after going through a period of abuse. I was raped, and I was trying to navigate my spirituality in this that period, where it was really complicated, because obviously I had such anger and sort of fear and frustration, all these different things towards a person. And I talked about this in another video, but the thing is that you're meant to have this mentality towards people like that, or like, it's not like, I think that it's not that you're forced to be like, oh, they're great people, I think they should be nice. But this is an example that I always remember reading in, I think it was one of Thich Nhat Hanh's books, that I'll link it below, I think, if I can find which one it is. But he was talking about how, so obviously the Tibetans were, they were being oppressed by Chinese. The Chinese people were sort of trying to I don't know, take their land. I don't remember it fully. Actually, I wrote a paper on it in high school. Now I'm forgetting that much. But I always remember reading that one of these monks, he got captured and was put in this prison by China. And basically, he was talking about how the most difficult part of everything was to keep compassion for Chinese people, because obviously he was very devout Buddhist, and that was like a big part of his faith, right? His religion. And he was like, the random scrolling of the images alongside this really deep conversation is really kind of killing me right now. But anyways, yeah, that was like, and I think that really struck me back then. I think that I always remember that, because first of all, I think it just spoke to the sort of challenge of being a Buddhist, but it also, I was like, oh, even somebody who's like it taught me a lot of different things. Like even somebody who's literally a monk struggles with it. Like it's not an easy thing. It's definitely, that's the thing, is that compassion is not an easy thing at all. It's not at all. It's very difficult to keep compassion for people. And I think I had a lot of like challenges to overcome with that. Like having compassion for somebody doesn't mean that what they did is okay. Having compassion for somebody doesn't mean that, that it's a gift to you. It's not a gift, not necessarily like, oh, I'm giving you a gift, or like I have to be nice to you. It's not about being nice to each other. It's about developing a relationship. For me, it was about developing resilience, actually. I think that it helped me develop a sort of resilience, because it helped me to not feel like people had the sort of power and control over me, and that I could still see them for who they were and not see them as the fear, like that was one of the big things that I learned after, I was like, oh, it's about not having compassion for someone also includes seeing the ways that they fail, their weaknesses. I was thinking about our dictator today. I won't say his name, current dictator. I was actually, I know, like I'm meant to see him as a bodhisattva, as somebody who is here to teach, to trigger me, challenge me to face some of these difficult things that stop me from reaching enlightenment. Okay. That's the way that you're meant to see it in Buddhism. And I think I had my first moment today where I was like, his father wound is so deep. I was like, he didn't get that love from his father, and now look how in pain he actually is. to be causing this level of pain in the world, that if he had been loved, if he felt good enough about himself, then he wouldn't be doing all of this at all. He wouldn't, because he wouldn't need that kind of validation that comes from being a dictator, right? So those are the kinds of, and then I was like, oh, he's really not all that. He's just a sad little boy navigating the world. And I wasn't even thinking that in a mean way, but in like, that's genuinely sad. And I'm sorry that you feel that. I'm sorry that that's your life. I'm sorry that you're navigating the world with that deep father wound all of the time, because I know how painful it is to navigate the world with a deep wound like that. And now you're navigating the world with this sort of wound, and you can't heal it. You have no way to sort of comprehend yourself. You have no way to understand how to heal yourself. So all you do is walk around trying to control people because you just want that love from your father that you never got. It's really deep conversations you start having with yourself like that when you navigate the world like that, where you're like, oh, this man isn't like, it's not like he's like, I think there's so much fear and so much anxiety and all these different things that build up resentment and all these things. I'm like, I think it just helped me to see like it just helps you see the reality. I think that's what I learned about compassion. But anyways, going back to it, I was in this situation, and I was like, this is the first big challenge that I've gotten as like having this mentality. Like, I think abstractly, when you do these loving kindness meditations and stuff like that, you basically you're like, how do I, you're supposed to extend compassion out to the people that your enemies too. And I was like, how do I have compassion for, I think it never really seemed that difficult because I didn't have real enemies. I think my enemies were abstractly like, people in the world that were hateful or whatever, right? I didn't have a real enemy. Then all of a sudden I was like, oh, wow, I despise this person. This person did so much harm to me. I don't see them as a good person. I don't think they deserve to be happy. Like all these different difficult emotions that I had that aren't a bad thing. I needed to feel that too, because I was in pain and I was like dealing with this really deep trauma, right? But I think that then the thing about Buddhism is that it's also it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge to keep teaching yourself to see the world that way so that you can be strong. I think that Buddhism is really about building internal resilience. And I think that that's a good thing, is that I think growing up with that upbringing, I had such a strong tool after I went through a traumatic experience. I was like, I have such a strong tool for myself to navigate the world with. And I'm so grateful. Like, I think that it gave me a framework to understand my own pain and to be like, how do I move forward with this in a way that I'm not going to be somebody like our current dictator, right? Who's just navigating the world lost, blind, hurting people. Like, you know what I mean? It was like, this is the direction you should go in. And I think that that's a tool that a lot of people don't have. And I didn't need it growing up, but when I got older, I did like need it, I feel. And then I was grateful to have it. I was very grateful. But anyways, I was like, how do I have compassion for this person? And that was a really big challenge for me at the time. It took me years of thinking about it. It was not an easy question for me at all. I was like, I don't really know, because this person, like I mentioned in another video, but it wasn't like, he wasn't somebody who like, oh, like, wow, he did that because he was like, someone like, like Michael Jackson, where it's like, it's obviously what he did was like awful, but it's like, I think that I don't think that people who had it happen to them should need to have this mentality. I don't think that anybody needs to. I'm just saying that, I think culturally we're sort of like, oh, that's one of those things where it's like, you can see the reason that somebody hurt another person is because they had that happen for them as a child, right? But with this person, I was like, I don't see any possible reason why they should be this way. There's not like an, they didn't grow up with some, and maybe I don't know enough. That's the other thing, is that I think sometimes you want to build someone, they are a villain, but you want to kind of build them even more into a villain in your head, where it's like, I don't really know everything about this person. This person was extremely shady looking back. I didn't even know enough about them at all. We weren't close at all, actually, like that close, really, even though they were in my life. But yeah, I just think that I was like, how do I build this compassion for this person? And how do I do that when I just don't see any possible, like, I can't psychoanalyze it in a way that makes me feel any kind of like, oh, I'm sorry that he went like through that, right? They had a comfortable life. They were older brother, super like sort of, mama's boy. Family was like enabled him to all get out, completely. From all the stories that I heard of things that I missed, they just absolutely enabled this person. Like, you know what I mean? It's one of those characters. You get those characters. I was like, how do I find compassion for him? I think finally at the end of the day, I was like, well, that's sad. I mentioned, I talked about this more in another video. I was like, that's really sad. Like, that's sad that what's sad is that that's the way that he finds his happiness. And that's so unfulfilling. Right. And I was like, having such deep love for the world that I do, it's so painful, but the world is so beautiful for me because of that. Right. Like, the world is so beautiful. It's so deep. I want to have kindness for people. I want to protect people. And seeing the world with that kind of love is beautiful. And seeing the world with that lack of love that would cause you to cause such harm to somebody, it's sad, right? It's a very sad thing to think that it's not even for me. I was like, it's not even about like, oh, he's lost something. Like, maybe he can, because he has that mentality, I'm sure he can navigate the world and be like all fine and dandy, right? And it's like, well, the thing is that's very sad, because it means that he's lacking something. He's lacking. It's like, it's not that. It's like I'm getting more from the world, right? I'm getting so much more love. I'm getting so much more like fulfillment from the world, having that mentality of wanting to have that love and that kindness for people. It's like, it's a beautiful thing. I'm so grateful that I'm this kind of person. It's beautiful. And like, that's something that's that's the dimension that I'm seeing the world through. And he's seeing the world through this dimension where everything is so, how empty must everything be for you to do something like that to a person, like no prompting, right? It's really sad. It's awful. So that was like my first big challenge in Buddhism, I think, was like, how do I find compassion for this person? And that was my first big one. And I honestly, I think navigate that from time to time, but that was like, I was like, that was a really, really big challenge. I think sometimes, like, even if somebody, like, okay, obviously, even if somebody feels really happy with what they, like, even if they feel happy with having like nothing, like not nothing, but if they feel happy being a negative person, like, obviously this dictator person, I feel sad for this father wound that they carry. And I think of the child that they were. I think, every child deserves to have love. Every child deserves to feel good about themselves. And they probably didn't. And that's why they're in the situation now, right? Where it's like, I think that it doesn't mean that I think that they're like, I mean, actually, this is the thing, is that I do think it's very painful. Like, for example, I think I talked about this in the other video too, where it's like, rich people who are constantly like people who hoard money. So billionaires, for example, first of all, we should look at that as a psychological issue that it is, because if somebody hoards figurines, we see them as having a psychological hoarding issue. But hoarding money, that's not a psychological issue too. It definitely is. And I think it probably it carries the same type of like anxieties and pain and like, I need more. Like, I said in the last video, I said it was like having a worm in your stomach, right? And I was like, I think it's actually ironic, because when you're poor, that's like the most painful thing in the world, right? Feeling like I need more money, but you actually do need it. But then when you get very wealthy, it's like, well, I still need more money. I need more money constantly to feel good about myself. I feel like I can't be happy unless I'm exploiting people. I feel like there's no purpose in life but to exploit other human beings, right? And you miss out on that feeling of like satisfaction of just loving people and being like a good source of energy for them. And I think that's like that makes me feel compassion, because it's sad. And I think that we should see it as like, I think that's the thing about compassion, is that it helps you see the truth of the world, right? That's not a good thing. That's a very sad thing. It's very painful. It's not enjoyable, even though people make it seem like it's enjoyable, but it's not. And I'm sure that it's not an enjoyable feeling. And this is the thing, is that, people like that are constantly portraying themselves like, oh, I have everything, right? Even, for example, a lot of people now, I think people overdo it with the psychology videos about narcissists and stuff. And people are like, oh, I dealt with a narcissist. I'm sure many of us have, to be fair. I think that our society encourages that kind of behavior. That being said, I think people are like, well, narcissists, they're still going to be like, they always are going to find a way to sort of see themselves as on top of. No, the thing is that it's a disorder, because it's also, I'm sure, extremely painful for people, in the sense that they constantly feel like they need to do something like that. They can't have normal relationships in order to be happy, right? They have to be constantly hurting somebody, undermining somebody. They have to be doing this, they have to be doing that, right? It's not like, oh, well, they're just going to, and this is the thing, is that I think I saw it in the past, like, well, how do I find compassion for these people? Because, like, for example, like this dictator person, well, they're still benefiting so greatly, right? They're still benefiting. They're still probably going on with their day feeling, I'm so proud of myself that I'm doing it. Well, it's like, but they're also lacking something that you and I know that adds that level of purpose, beauty, and like, like the sort of weight to your life that they don't know how to access at all. And that's why they do the things that they do, right? That's the thing about, for example, like, I know that I've been reading content or like engaging with content about people with antisocial personality disorder, okay? And so people used to call it like sociopaths, right? So people with antisocial personality disorder, there's a really good woman. I'm gonna link her, but she talks about her. She's a psychologist now, actually, and she talks about she has it, and she will talk about it, and she talks about how she had these moments as a child where it was very difficult because she saw that other people were feeling things that she should feel, but she just couldn't feel them, right? And that was a painful thing for her growing up, right? Or she would go out, she had these really intense urges to go do these things that like were that sort of relieved the feeling of being a sociopath, like, or being someone with antisocial personality disorder, like breaking into people's houses and stuff like that. It was not like, even though on the surface it seems like, well, they don't feel anything. Well, it's like, but it's extremely painful to not be engaging with the world with that level of like, I think it makes you feel connected to people and all these things, to feel compassionate and stuff. And it can be a difficult feeling too, but I think that it adds a sort of gift and the sort of feeling of connection and sort of feeling of like, I love people and I'm here for a purpose, that I think it's not, even though people on the surface, it seems like, well, they don't feel bad. Well, it's like, yeah, but people can tell that they're lacking in something. And that's why they go out and engage in those difficult behaviors, So I think that those are like, this got weirdly psychological, but I was trying to talk about Buddhism and got psychological, but I think that's one of the big things, is that it helps you to see the world like through a deeper lens and just be like, oh, it's not that people are just like, I'm fine and dandy now because great, I got away with it. But it's like, you got away with it, but it's like you feel that feeling deep down of like you're like somebody who does these bad things and you don't necessarily feel bad about it, but you don't feel connected to other people in the same way. And like, I think that it's just about shifting the perspective and just being like, it's not that people, it's not because somebody got away with it, or, well, they're just going to keep doing the bad things, that there's not a painful element to that. And I think that it was good for me to have that compassion lens and to not get stuck in like, well, they're just going to go on and have a great and dandy life. Well, I'm gaining something too. Look how much I gained from having the relationship to my trauma that I did, from wanting to navigate the world compassionately and all these different things. Like, I gained this sort of strength and this resilience and this viewpoint, and also the pull to go do things that would improve the world and things that would help the world. That's a gift, and I'm like reaping the benefits.
All right, my last clip just got completely all the audio deleted, which happens from time to time. So I'm just gonna try to summarize everything really quick that I said before, just to end the video. But at least it's good because the Teams webcam makes me look a little bit crusty dusty, so we'll end on a cuter note. You see, the lighting in the other room is like bad. That's why I always look bad in that room. But anyways, basically I was just gonna talk about some last, like, what I was talking about in the video was just my different, like, just these sorts of realizations that I had along my path with Buddhism that I thought were interesting, or like conceptually interesting, or maybe important to somebody else. But basically, another one I had, this was when I was in college, and I was really struggling mentally at that period of time. I was struggling heavily with dissociation too, and that's actually around the time that I started writing this undergraduate thesis that ended up bleeding into this project. But basically, I was thinking about the concept of enlightenment, and how I was just reflecting on it. I was reflecting on the fact that, if like reaching nirvana or reaching enlightenment or whatever, it's sort of the point, I guess, of Buddhism, that you reach this sort of point where you feel like sort of in bliss, or you feel like everything is sort of, just feel detached, you feel like your ego has fallen, you feel like the illusion is gone, whatever. So that's sort of the point of Buddhism, and I was walking around reflecting on it, and I started thinking about the fact that I think it's pretty ironic, because one of the big teachings of Buddhism, or one of the big things that you're meant to learn, is that we as humans get really attached to the idea of things being permanent. We get really attached to the idea of permanent states, that we're going to have something forever, that, this is going to be us forever now, or that our self is this sort of permanent sort of fixture. And we really struggle to cope with the idea of impermanence. So we really struggle to cope with the idea that, for example, one day we're going to die, one day people around us are going to die, or that the things around us we're not going to have forever. I'm going to link below this great podcast episode I listened to one time. It's like the cup is already broken, something like that. And the whole concept was that there's this sort of idea that it was this guy was talking about this Buddhist phrase in a conjunction with his favorite mug, and how the things that we have in our life are going to be gone one day. They're going to be, for example, this guy's favorite cup is going to be broken one day. So you might as well, you should just embrace the fact that it's going to be broken one day and just be like, well, I'm going to enjoy it while it's here, but accept the fact that it's sort of this impermanent fixture in my life. And so then I started thinking about the idea of enlightenment, also the idea that it's something to chase, or like this journey to sort of achieve, or this to chase this thing. And like, it's funny because the idea of reaching enlightenment or reaching this permanent state of bliss and everything is so opposite to everything that you're meant to learn in Buddhism. And I think that's pretty funny. And I just started to think that maybe, I don't know, I had a lot of thoughts around it. I was like, maybe it's not. Maybe there is no permanent state of enlightenment. Like, maybe it's not really something to like, oh, it's this golden sort of doorway at the end of the journey, and it's like, it's not really that. And maybe it's something that you're gonna have it for a bit, that's gonna be gone, then you're gonna have it again. Maybe you get better at being in that state, and it's not necessarily, something to sort of chase, or this sort of end goal. And in that sense, it's already, you already reached it. There you go. It's funny because when I have ADHD, right, and sometimes I've learned to do this where sometimes I feel like I get really stuck, and I can't move through an assignment because I'm so stuck on the fact that I have another assignment to do. And sometimes if I go and I do a little bit of that other assignment, it's almost like my brain gets unstuck and like I can just keep going. And I feel like I was like, I think sometimes people get really stuck on the idea that there's like this golden sort of state to reach, and it's like, well, you reached it, like it's done, what now? I don't know, like I think that people get so stuck on that journey, and I was just thinking about that and how I guess that helped me get a little bit closer, that it's about releasing that sort of anxiety and that sort of attachment to the idea that there's something to reach at the end, and there's really not at all. Okay, this next one is like very, very conceptual sort of, and I did speak about it. I made one other random video that I keep referencing that I'll link below, where I was just talking about spirituality, just kind of random. I just got like the urge, but basically one time I was actually like one of my first times coming to visit London, and I had gone to the museum. I went to the British Museum, and I went after, and I was sitting outside in the grass in that little park like right outside. But I was just basically sitting and really like in a good mood because I had just seen this really cool exhibit at the British Museum, and I had gone to see some really ancient art, like Mesopotamian. I love Mesopotamian art. I actually love going to the British Museum just to like, I love seeing that ancient art. It's so cool. But like with the goddesses, and it's very like carnal and stuff. I really, really like that kind of stuff. And I started thinking about how like I was thinking about reincarnation. I was like, if I reincarnated, I feel like I definitely was like around during those times. Like I feel like my soul is very, very old. And I was like, I feel like I was like around in Mesopotamian times. And I was just having this really funny thought process and thinking about all of that. Anyways, and then I started thinking about Buddhism and enlightenment and stuff like that. I started looking around at people, and I was like, it's so sad. I was like, I feel like people aren't, I was like, it's so sad that not everybody will reach enlightenment. Like some people are just never gonna be in that state of mind. Some people never go down that path or anything like that. And then I caught myself, and I just had this realization for the first time that I was like, okay, this is about to sound really conceptual. This is like really, really just like Buddhist talk, spiritual talk sort of stuff. I was like, why do I assume that they're not already like enlightened? Why do I assume that they're not? Why do I look at them like I'm projecting all this anger, or not even anger, but just a sort of like I'm better, or not even better. Like I don't think I was even trying to be better, but just like I assume that I'm there and that people aren't, and it's like that's all me. And then I started to have this really abstract realization. I was like, everybody is enlightened. I was like, everybody already is enlightened. The only person that's not is me. I was like, I'm the only person that has to go down that path. I'm the only person that needs to dissolve my own ego because it's me projecting that ego onto everybody. And I know that sounds insane because, like, you look around, you're like, well, there's people that really suck or all this stuff. It's like, it's like, I know it sounds strange, but I was like, it was really deep. I was like, I was like, I need to do it. I was like, I need to catch up. I was like, everybody else is already there. I need to catch up. I need to do it myself, and I need to go through my own path, and I need to be on this individual journey with myself. And also, I was like, if I'm still doing this, I was like, knowing that we're all sort of one mind, one consciousness, if I'm still here doing this, if I'm projecting my ego onto everybody, if I'm the one being like jerky and all this stuff, like sort of projecting these thought processes on the people, then then we're never gonna reach it because it's me. Like, it's all me. You know what I mean? I was like, it's all me. I need to solve myself. I need to navigate my own mind, my own ego, and what I'm projecting onto other people. Because if I'm not even there and I'm sitting around here judging, like looking at people like, oh, it's sad that people won't go down that path. I was like, but I'm not even there. If I'm not there, nobody is there, because then that means like there's still that almost like that bump in the road. That's me. And it's like, I'm the bump in the road. I need to freaking like I need to get myself together. And yeah, I don't know. I was like, all of a sudden I was just like, everybody is enlightened. Why am I need to project that onto everybody. And I mean, not obviously to realistic degree, but I'm talking about from an abstract point of view. I was like, I'm the one who's not there. And like, I'm keeping everybody from advancing because I need to like do my work. After that point is when I got more heavily into the idea of manifestation. Again, I think everything just borrows from each other. I think there's a lot of things that are just sort of universal truths that we start to recognize about ourselves. That's actually the one main thing I had a lot of different thoughts about White Lotus season 3, but that was one thing that I started thinking about a lot during that, is that Buddhism is an idea. There's a security guard, I think his name is Gaitok, but basically so they're all in Thailand in the show, and he's Thai, obviously, and he's one of the few, like, Thai characters that we super duper interact with, and he's a Buddhist, but he's having this whole struggle because he's basically like, he's too much of a pacifist. Like, he doesn't want to like sort of rat anybody out. He doesn't want to like hurt anybody, kill anybody, but because low key he's just too scared to do it. But he keeps blaming it on his Buddhism. He's like, well, I'm a Buddhist, like I don't want to. I was actually relating to his character a bit because I was thinking about my own journey with like compassion, and how sometimes I think that I used compassion as like a guise for just me being too much of a people pleaser or whatever, etc. It's like, well, I should be nice to them. Well, it's like, no, you should. That's not authentic kindness. But anyways, I think that what's funny about him is that it kind of shows that Buddhism is really just like an idea. I think that there's this whole, like, obviously the show is always exploring all these different racial tensions between like the inhabitants of a country versus these sort of white people that are coming into vacation. And it's kind of interesting because I think that a lot of them have this dynamic where they're sort of mesmerized or just interested in, for example, the Indian lady or the Thai people there's these sort of group, they're like wiser or more spiritual. And I think that Guy Talk is a pretty interesting example where it's like, yeah, Buddhism is like this very wise practice, but it doesn't necessarily mean that just because you are like engaging in that you're necessarily like this super ultra wise being. Like, he was still making all these sort of mistakes with his Buddhism and all these different things. And it's like this concept, and just because he's from that culture doesn't necessarily mean that even he is engaged. He's like this like sort of like this like wise sage because he's like, Asian. I don't know if that's the intended purpose, but I was kind of taking that away from it, just thinking about how Buddhism is really just an idea, and it's the sort of universal truth that everybody's going to have a different like relationship to. Anyways, manifestation is just the adjacent sort of idea or thought process that that our world is just sort of this illusion that we create with our minds, our subconscious mind is really dictating a lot about the world, or dictating our reality, or etc. And I engage with that in like a lot of different ways, but I think that that's when that was the first time it really sunk in for me, because I think I was having that process of like, oh, so much of what I think is reality is me projecting like my internal reality onto people and just assuming that to be some kind of universal truth. And so I feel like manifestation was like almost like, in The Sims, you can get these sorts of extension packs for your Sims characters. I feel like for me, I was like, okay, it's a little bit of an extension pack because then I used it in the sense of that for example, going down this project, I really like utilize those ideas that, for example, that I had a lot of things that if I could work through some of the blockages in my own subconscious mind, that I could go further, that I could create a lasting change in the world and all these different things. Because going back full circle to my initial tension with Buddhism, I think that I had was that um, I I was always a little bit just in tension with the idea. I think that Buddhism goes really sometimes really far into the immaterial, or to the idea that the world is sort of an illusion, all these different things. I mean, yeah, and also that our suffering is just sort of part of life, and it is, and I think that that's something to make peace with. But the difficulty that I had is like just because I sit with that, just because it's true, and just because like it doesn't mean that the material world isn't still here, that people are still suffering here, and that, for example, like just because, let's say, I start to reach some of these truths within myself, it doesn't mean that the world is going away. It doesn't mean that I'm ascending into some other plane of existence. I'm still here. And it's just I think it's a hard time, particularly to be like, I'm going to sit back when there's genocides, there's like a dictatorship, all these different things. So for me, I feel like manifestation was like almost like the material extension pack that I think I needed, and I think a lot of times it is the sort of a little bit more of the materialistic sort of leaning that the West sort of took that idea and sort of made it a little bit more like you can be a billionaire. Where it's like I think that I'm in tension. There's so many things to be in tension with, but I think that all that it basically helped me to do was just to be like, oh, you can do bigger for the world. You can have a bigger sort of impact on the world, that you can visualize it and you can get it there. And the only thing stopping you is the illusions within yourself that are stopping you from reaching bigger things. Because I just never wanted to, like, I don't feel comfortable being like, I'm done now, and like, yeah, everybody can do it, like in their next life, I'll come back and like help everybody out, or stuff like that, where I'm like, no, that doesn't sit right with me at all. Like I'm still here. And I think that also, I think what that inspired me to do as well, manifestation and everything, was to look at the world and be like, so often we have these sort of collective truths that I think we sort of navigate, and that, for example, it inspired me to see myself as also a piece of the source of some of these issues in the world. Like, for example, the idea that we're always gonna, like, racism is just a part of life. For example, that we can't eradicate something like white supremacy, or something that that's just part of who we are. That's just how humans are, and I think that sometimes we get into these sorts of cycles of ideas that we sort of repeat amongst each other, that we can't do better, and that's just part of life. And I think that seeing the world as, like, myself as a sort of source of the world as well, and a source of the reality that I'm living, and this, I think just that realization that, like, wow, a lot of what reality is just my projection onto life. To see, like, oh, why, I know it sounds a little bit extreme, but I'm like, why is there still such a deep racism issue? Why white supremacy so deeply? That's like one of my big things, right? That I feel like the path I went down, I was like, why is it so prevalent still? And I was like, well, I myself start agreeing with the idea that it's something that we can't get rid of, that people are just like that it's just like there's no changing it, right? And it's like, yeah, but if I change the belief within myself, then I get inspired to start innovating, to start doing something different, and to start breaking people out of that cycle, so that we don't continue that like thought process, or that sort of little idea, and we can all grow out of it, right? Whereas, as if I sit around and think, well, that's just how people are, or that's just how the world is, well, I'm not really inspired to innovate. I'm not really inspired to do anything different. I'm just sitting around being like, okay, that's just life then, and just engaging in these sort of collective cycles where it's like, no, I am also a source of world. I'm also a source of reality, and I don't have to engage in that belief. I can subvert that belief within myself. I can change the belief within myself, and I can act differently to see a different reality manifesting in the world. I don't have to basically sit around and be like, that's life. Like, no. And I think that that's what manifestation also gave me, even though it's a bit more new agey and combined also with the things that I learned from Buddhism. So yeah, that's in my talk. I guess I'll save the rest of. I've already continued to work on my proposal, and like there's more to it, but I'm just gonna save that for the next video because this is kind of cool, and I didn't really think that I was gonna talk about this. So yeah.